The rusted iron gate creaked open on a quiet street in Pico Rivera. There were no marble columns, no tall fences, no Hollywood-style private property signs. Just an aging single-story house where the morning begins with the sound of barking dogs, the smell of freshly roasted coffee, and a gray-haired man slowly tying his shoelaces. From that scene alone, no one would guess this is the home of a face that once held audiences breathless in hundreds of films, a man known for playing killers, prisoners, and cold-blooded henchmen, Danny Trejo. Hollywood was once afraid of that face. The tattoos, the icy stare, the jaw clenched as if always ready for a fight. Machete, Heat, Con Air, Desperado. On screen, Trejo embodied violence, the streets, people with nothing left to lose. But the paradox is this: the man survived not by the knife, not by his fists, not by cruelty, but by sobriety, discipline, and a principle that sounds almost impossibly fragile. Everything good in my life comes from helping others. That line is not an inspirational slogan hung on a wall. It was forged from 11 years in prison, from heroin at the age of 12, from lightless solitary confinement, from failed marriages, brushes with death from illness, and from old age spent facing tax debt, scandals, and a body that no longer obeys as it once did. Danny Trejo did not enter Hollywood in search of glory. Hollywood merely happened to open its doors to a man who had lived long enough to understand that if he did not save others, sooner or later, he would return to destroying himself. This is not a comforting from criminal to star story. It is the journey of a man born into violence, raised in fear, shaped by prison, and who only truly began to live when he learned how to stay with life, one sober choice at a time. Before becoming Hollywood's symbol of survival, Danny Trejo was simply a child running from chaos. And to understand why he survived, we must go much farther back, to a place where pain arrived even before memory. Before the name Danny Trejo became associated with the image of a survivor, he was simply a child born into chaos. Echo Park, Los Angeles, 1944, a poor working-class neighborhood where violence was not an event, but a way of life. His father, Dionisio Trejo, was a construction worker who brought home not only sweat, but rage. When Danny was still very young, a bar fight ended with a knife attack, forcing the entire family to flee to Texas like refugees. His childhood began with learning how to stay silent, how to avoid danger, and how to survive within a vague fear that a child did not yet have the words to name. When his father was arrested and the family returned to Los Angeles, life did not become any easier to breathe. Pacoima, where they settled, was another world. Gangs, drugs, guns, and children who grew up faster than their age. In that house, Danny found no sense of safety. Violence did not come only from the streets. It seeped into family life itself, leaving him with a familiar feeling. If he did not protect himself, no one would do it for him. It was in that void that young Danny turned to the one person who made him feel noticed: his Uncle Gilbert. Gilbert was not a savior. He was the gateway that led Danny into another world, where recognition came from recklessness, loyalty was proven by fists, and drugs were treated as tools for survival. Danny smoked marijuana for the first time at 8 years old, and before his 13th birthday, heroin had already become a habit. But Gilbert also taught him one crucial thing, in the harshest way possible: how to fight. Not to win, but not to go down. Danny learned boxing not in a gym, but through merciless beatings, where every time he stood back up meant keeping both his life and his fragile sense of dignity. His teenage years passed between reform schools, police stations, and streets where a gun could go off at any moment. At 10, Danny was arrested for the first time for assault. Then came theft, armed robbery, and gang shootouts. To him, this was not a fall from grace, but simply a way of life, a value system built from fear and madness. Because in the world, people did not fear the strong. They feared those who had nothing left to lose. And Danny Trejo, at a very young age, had already become exactly that kind of person. That path soon led Danny Trejo to what society calls the end point, prison. But to him, it was simply another chapter of street life, built with higher walls and locked in steel. Throughout the 1960s, Trejo moved in and out of California's prison system so often that he would later say he had been in almost every prison in the state. Charge followed charge. Robbery, drug trafficking, and acts of violence he no longer had the clarity to distinguish as right or wrong. In that world, the only law was survival, and survival meant never being weak. In prison, boxing was no longer a choice. It was an identity. Trejo fought to hold his position, to avoid being swallowed whole, and to assert that he still existed. He became the lightweight and welterweight champion in every facility he was transferred to, a title that brought no glory, but was enough to keep others at a distance. Those punches saved him from many retaliations, but they also locked him into the role he believed was his fate, a violent man with no way back. The turning point did not arrive in light, but in absolute darkness. After the Cinco de Mayo riot of 1968 at San Quentin, Trejo was transferred to Soledad and placed in solitary confinement. No windows, no clock, no human voices, only darkness, the smell of damp concrete and memories looping in his mind like a broken film reel. He replayed scenes from The Wizard of Oz, repeating the line, "There's no place like home," like a desperate mantra, even though he himself did not know what home meant. In that space, Trejo confronted a stark truth. He was only 24 years old, yet had lived as if every door was already closed. It was there, for the first time in his life, that he prayed. Not a moral plea, but the bargaining of a man who had run out of roads. If there was some force out there, let things unfold exactly as they were meant to. If not, there was nothing left to lose anyway. Not long after, the charges related to the riot were dropped, and Trejo walked out of prison in 1969 as a man free on paper. But inside, he remained addicted, volatile, and utterly unsure how to live without bars surrounding him. Change did not come immediately. It began slowly, in Alcoholics Anonymous and Narcotics Anonymous meetings that Trejo initially attended simply to pass the time. But each confession, each shattered story from people just like him, forced him to confront something more frightening than prison itself: responsibility. Responsibility for himself, for the choices that had brought him there, and for the possibility, appearing for the first time, that his life might turn in a different direction. And it was precisely when he began helping other addicts stay sober that Trejo unknowingly stepped onto the only path that could save him from returning to the old cycle, living for others, before he could destroy himself again. That new path, ironically, did not begin with ambition or dreams of reinvention, but with a familiar cry for help. By then, Trejo was out of prison, sober, and doing what he saw as his duty of redemption, counseling young people standing on the same edge he once had. One day in 1985, an 18-year-old called him in a panic, saying his workplace was filled with cocaine and that if he stayed there a few more hours, he would relapse. Trejo did not hesitate. He thought he would sit in the car, smoke, drink coffee, get the kid through the craving, and leave. But when he arrived, he stepped into an entirely different world. A film set, people dressed as prisoners, harsh lights, and cameras already rolling. Runaway train. Trejo stood in that setting feeling both amused and disoriented, as if the prison of his life had been rebuilt with wood and light. Then a man approached him and called him by name. Eddie Bunker, a writer, a former convict, and someone who had once stood in the same yard with Trejo at San Quentin. No introductions were needed, no audition required. Just by looking at the tattoos on Trejo's chest, Bunker knew he was seeing a truth Hollywood could never fabricate. He asked Trejo if he still boxed, then offered him $320 a day to train Eric Roberts for the role. To Trejo, it was an unbelievable sum, not because it was large, but because for the first time in his life, he was being paid simply to be himself. Everything happened so fast that Trejo did not yet realize this was a turning point. Director Andrei Konchalovsky noticed the way Trejo stood, the way he threw a punch, the way he controlled the space around Eric Roberts, and decided to put him in front of the camera. No acting classes, no theory, no transformation. Trejo did not play a prisoner. He carried his entire life in prison onto the screen. And when the camera rolled, he realized something strange. For the first time, his violent past did not drag him down, but became something of value. From that moment on, Trejo did not seek out Hollywood. Hollywood sought him out. Small roles followed one after another. Inmate number one, Cholo number one, nameless faces that were nonetheless unmistakable. He appeared in Desperado, Heat, From Dusk Till Dawn, Con Air, Spy Kids. Sometimes only minutes on screen, but enough for audiences to remember that gaze, the eyes of someone who had survived places that most people shudder at merely hearing about. Trejo worked relentlessly, not to become famous, but because he understood one thing clearly. If he stopped, if he stayed idle for too long, the old demon could return. Amid the packed shooting schedules, Trejo continued to return regularly to prisons, juvenile detention centers, and rehabilitation facilities. He spoke to children society had long since written off, not with sermons, but with his scarred body itself. He believes, and repeats often, that everything good in his life has come from helping others. Hollywood is just a job. Sobriety is survival. And every morning before signing an autograph or stepping onto a set, Trejo still prays a simple prayer, that he be humble enough to never forget where he came from and sober enough to never return there again. When his acting career had become stable enough to no longer feel like a random miracle, Danny Trejo began to face a different question, quieter but persistent. If one day the cameras stopped rolling, what would he have left? The answer was not on red carpets or box office charts, but in the kitchens he had thought about in prison, where the smell of food was a rare memory of family and ordinary life. Trejo did not see opening restaurants as a business pivot, but as a way to bring the past back under his own control. In 2016, Trejo's Tacos opened in Los Angeles, not as a flashy celebrity brand, but as a greeting to the neighborhood that raised him and nearly killed him. The dishes that bear Trejo's name do not try to tell a cinematic story. They tell a real one. Carnitas, carne asada, chicken tinga, tacos rooted in street tradition, and even vegan options. An acknowledgement that people can change without denying where they come from. In that kitchen, Trejo does not play the role of the boss. He stands like a worker, tasting food, offering suggestions, checking in with staff, many of whom have criminal records, many of whom society once pushed to the margins. To Trejo, giving someone a job is not just about a paycheck. It is giving them a reason not to return to the old path. From tacos, the story expanded to coffee, donuts, and then new restaurants opening across Los Angeles, Las Vegas, and even beyond the United States. Trejo does not hide his ambition, but it is not the ambition of getting rich. He says plainly that he does not need to become a millionaire many times over. He needs a system large enough to keep giving, durable enough to survive after he is no longer standing behind the counter. In every restaurant, Trejo leaves deeply personal traces. Family photos, old music, menu items named after memories. This is not branding strategy. It is his way of reminding himself that everything he has today comes not from running away from who he once was, but from learning how to live alongside it. Alongside his growing food empire, Trejo continues to show up in the places with the least light. Juvenile detention centers, prisons, rehabilitation facilities. He does not arrive as a star. He comes as someone who once sat in the very same chair. Some of the kids recognize him from the movies, but what makes them listen is not his roles. It is the simple truth he repeats again and again. The road of addiction leads to only 3 places: death, insanity, or prison. He offers no promises of miracles, no talk of Hollywood as a dream. He speaks of sobriety as a job that must be done every day with no days off. Perhaps that is why Trejo's acts of kindness in real life never feel like performances. When he rushed into an overturned car to rescue a trapped child, there was no script. Only the reflex of a man who has lived long enough to understand that if there is still a chance to save someone, you take it immediately. Trejo does not see this as heroism. To him, it is a natural continuation of his life. Someone who once took, now learning how to give back. And in every meal, every piece of advice, every outstretched hand, Danny Trejo is quietly completing the most important role of his life. Not on screen, but in the real world. Fame came to Danny Trejo in a peculiar way, not as a radiant dream, but as a late reward for a man who had survived too long. Yet precisely because it arrived late, it carried a different cost, quieter, more persistent, and harder to repair than even the years spent in prison. Trejo walked out of incarceration with a simple vow: to be a good person. Not to be famous, not to be wealthy, just someone who no longer hurts others. But what he carried from a childhood of abuse, from prison, from addiction, did not disappear simply because he became sober. It remained as a kind of mechanical wound. The more he wanted to love the right way, the more unconsciously he damaged the very things he touched. Danny Trejo's first marriage did not begin with romance, but with a longing for salvation. He had just been released from prison, the smell of steel still clinging to him, his mind still ruled by the survival codes of iron bars. Trust no one for too long, reveal no weakness, rely on no one. Yet beneath that hardened shell was a man exhausted by loneliness, craving something painfully simple. A home not locked by prison bolts, someone waiting for him to return, an evening that required no vigilance. He married quickly, as if afraid that if he hesitated, the chance to be a normal man would vanish. That marriage was not the result of maturity, but a desperate grasp. The woman beside him believed love could heal him, and Trejo believed, or forced himself to believe, that having a family would somehow make everything fall into place. But no one told them a cruel truth. Love cannot heal wounds that have never been named. In their small home, Trejo lived like a temporary resident. He slept very little. Quiet nights unsettled him more than noise ever could. Calm, what others called happiness, felt to him like the hollow pause before a riot. He would sit in silence for hours, eyes unfocused, as if waiting for someone to give an order. His wife tried to talk, to ask, to reach for him with ordinary gestures of daily life. But every question felt like an interrogation. Every embrace made him tense, because in his mind, closeness always carried risk. Trejo did not know how to speak about his past. Not out of shame, but because he had no language for it. How do you explain growing up without ever knowing what safety feels like? How do you say that in your mind, every relationship is destined to collapse? So it is better not to trust too deeply? Instead of speaking, he fell silent. And over time, that silence became a wall higher than any prison fence. Trejo's anger was never explosive. It came in quiet undercurrents. He snapped at small things. A repeated question, a reminder, an apparently harmless request. His wife began walking on tiptoe in her own home, learning how to avoid the dark zones that even Trejo himself could not control. There was no documented violence, but the quiet fear was real. The fear that the man in front of her was still living in another world, where family was only a fragile concept. The most painful part was that Trejo truly tried. He worked, kept discipline, stayed away from alcohol and drugs. He wanted to prove that he had changed. But trying to live right is not the same as knowing how to live close. He did not know how to share a bad day. He did not know how to apologize without feeling as if he were surrendering. He did not know how to say, "I need you," without hearing it as weakness. Day by day, the distance between them was worn away in silence. When the marriage ended, there was no drama, no tears in court, no accusations, only the heavy weight of a failure neither of them had the words to name. For Trejo, it was not just a divorce. It was the moment he realized a painful truth. Leaving prison does not mean freedom. Some prisons exist within the way a person is raised, and he was still living inside one. Later, after fame arrived and he was called a symbol of redemption, Trejo rarely spoke about his first marriage. Not because it was unimportant, but because it was his most primal failure. The place where he first understood that good intentions are not enough to make someone good, and that some wounds, if left unhealed, will follow us into every relationship, quietly destroying them from the inside. Then Diana Walton appeared. With Diana, Trejo became a father for the first time. In 1981, his son, Danny Boy, was born. It was the moment that made Trejo believe he could rewrite his fate. He did not want to disappear like the men in his past. He did not want to become a shadow. That marriage did not last either. Years of incarceration, addiction, and a lack of shared life skills do not vanish simply because a child arrives. But unlike before, Trejo did not walk away. He tried to remain present in his son's life in the best way a deeply flawed father could. Not perfect, not consistent, but present. For Trejo, that was already a small victory over destiny. The relationships that followed, with Debbie Shepek, then Joanne at different stages, were like temporary shelters. In them, Trejo searched for peace, for the feeling of being accepted, of being loved without having to prove anything. But old wounds do not heal simply because someone is there. He carried the vigilance of a prisoner, the volatility of a man who had once survived through violence, and a deep-seated fear that if someone truly saw who he was, they would leave. So he unconsciously pushed them away before he could be abandoned. Love, for Trejo, always began as salvation and ended as a quiet retreat. His fourth marriage, to Debbie Shreve, which began in 1997, was the largest family window of his life. By then, Trejo was famous, sober, and living with discipline. Debbie brought him a sense of stability he had never known, a real home, quiet evenings, the sound of children in the next room. For many years, Trejo believed he had finally done things right. But fame, arriving late, began to demand its price. Long shooting schedules, constant travel, prolonged absences not born of escape, but of work. The house no longer echoed with the same laughter. Silence crept in. The most dangerous kind of silence in a marriage. No arguments, no explosions. Just the sense that everyone was living beside one another instead of living together. When the divorce papers were finalized in 2009, Trejo was not shocked. He simply realized that he had lost yet another family, not out of malice, but because he did not know how to stop in time. After everything he had lived through, Danny Trejo came to recognize a painful truth. What he lost most was not money, not marriages, not fame, but time. Time not spent enough with his children. Time absent when his family needed him most. Time that slipped away while he was busy proving that he deserved to be here. Fame did not take everything from Danny Trejo, but it forced him to face what can never be recovered. There are moments that, even after he became a better man, were already too late to live again. Beyond the succession of failed marriages and accumulating personal tragedies, he was forced to confront illness once more. In 2010, Trejo was diagnosed with liver cancer, a large tumor, too large to begin conventional chemotherapy. He kept silent, not out of fear, but because he had already signed multiple film contracts and did not want to become a burden or an excuse for pity. Trejo endured in silence, as he himself put it. The irony was stark. A man who had survived stabbings, riots, and solitary confinement now had to face the most invisible enemy of all. When treatment succeeded and he was told there were no remaining cancer cells, he did not celebrate loudly. He simply exhaled, as if accustomed to living through yet another stretch of life he once never believed he would have. As Danny Trejo approached his late 70s, he had survived nearly every form of destruction a human being could encounter. Domestic violence, heroin addiction from adolescence, more than a decade behind bars, liver cancer, and years in which Hollywood saw him only as a criminal face. And so it is bitterly ironic that his late-life fall did not come from drugs, not from gunfire, not from fame, but from something far colder and more indifferent: paperwork and numbers. In 2023, news that Danny Trejo owed more than $2 million in back taxes appeared in the press as a dry, matter-of-fact line. No sensational headline, no moral sermon, just an administrative notice: outstanding debt, penalties, interest upon interest. For a man who had once sat in a San Quentin cell watching the red light that signaled someone was being executed, this blow did not carry the familiar scent of fear. It carried the smell of modern helplessness. There was no enemy to punch, no one to run from, only the system. What mattered was not the number, but Trejo's response. He did not assign blame. He did not complain publicly. He did not cast himself as a victim of Hollywood exploitation. He did what is very Danny Trejo. He dealt with it. He sold a house, paid nearly $400,000 up front, proactively restructured his finances, sought trustworthy experts, cut spending, and accepted a step back. A man who had learned how to survive in prison came to a bitter realization. No one had taught him how to survive within the financial system once he was free. The streets taught him vigilance. Prison taught him discipline. But paperwork, no one taught him that. And then, as if time itself wanted to remind him that old age allows no margin for error, another moment of chaos arrived on July 4th, 2024. At a community event, Trejo was hit with a water balloon. In the crowd, someone shouted the word acid. Just one word, but enough to trigger survival reflexes. Chaos erupted. Pushing. A scuffle. Images spread faster than the truth. For a man whose face is synonymous with cinematic violence, the public immediately expected a familiar script. retaliation, lawsuits, rage. But Trejo did none of that. He did not demand blood. He did not amplify the incident. He did not play the hero. He simply said, and with sadness, with exhaustion, that he wished it had never happened. At 30, such a statement might have been dismissed as weakness, but at nearly 80, it was a different kind of strength, knowing how to step away instead of charging in, knowing that not every collision requires a victor. There are moments when retreat is the only way to continue living right. The climax of this stage of life does not lie in tax debt or a scuffle. It lies in a very late, very human realization. In old age, the enemy is no longer the streets, but margins of error, lapses, and a moment of panic. Danny Trejo did not collapse, but he is not invulnerable either. And that is precisely what makes his image now more truthful than ever. A man who has exhausted the violence of his life, only to learn how to face things that cannot be punched, cannot be outrun, and cannot be overcome by playing Machete. If he once survived through fists and willpower, at this stage he survives through late-life sobriety, something that does not come from cinema, but from accepting this truth. There are battles where winning or losing matters less than not letting yourself fall again. In old age, Trejo chooses to live alone. Not out of loneliness, but because he has learned the value of quiet. His evenings pass with Dodgers, Lakers, and LAFC games, shouting at the television as a harmless ritual of release. He prays every day, not for fame or money, but for the clarity to sign every photo, answer every letter, and never turn away from someone who needs to be seen. Trejo's faith is not loud. A small cross, a Bible, and the belief that even the most broken people can still be held. Danny Trejo's private life is not a story of complete happiness. It is a story of broken relationships, opportunities that arrived too late, and a relentless effort not to turn his back on himself again. He does not coat the past with redemption. He carries it with him as a reminder that salvation does not come from forgetting who you once were, but from continually choosing to be better, no matter how late it may be. What Danny Trejo leaves behind for the world cannot be contained within a list of more than 400 roles or the violent frames that have become iconic. His legacy begins in a place far less often mentioned, rooms without cameras, unpaid conversations, and people standing at the very edge, just as he was decades ago. Trejo has never seen himself as a figure to be admired. He sees himself as living proof that there is a way back, even if it is narrow and scraped raw. In the film industry, Trejo opened a different standard for faces that had long been discarded. He did not soften his background to fit Hollywood. Instead, he forced Hollywood to confront it. Under Trejo's presence, roles labeled criminal, outcast, or survivor ceased to be mere backdrops for clean-cut heroes in the foreground. They carried weight, history, and the sense that violence does not arise from fiction, but from systems that abandon people very early on. For many Latino actors, and those whose appearance does not fit the star mold, Trejo became an open door, not by promising that things would be easy, but by proving that truth, however rough, still has a place. Trejo's influence extends beyond cinema through a more direct language, action. For decades, he has entered prisons, juvenile facilities, and rehabilitation centers, not to tell a story of, "I made it," but to say, "I almost died." Trejo does not preach morality. He recounts in detail what prison takes away: youth, family, time, and even the ability to dream. It is that blunt honesty that makes young people listen, not because he is a star, but because he once stood exactly where they are standing now. Trejo has also turned his own rebirth into a durable structure through business. Trejo's Tacos, Trejo's Coffee and Donuts, and Trejo's Cantina are not merely celebrity brand adventures. They are spaces for second chances. Trejo deliberately hires people with criminal records, people who have struggled with addiction, resumes that most businesses avoid. To him, giving someone a decent job is not an act of charity, but a survival strategy to break the old cycle. "If someone hadn't given me a chance, I wouldn't be here," Trejo says, and his entire food empire operates as a constant reminder of that truth. Trejo's influence also reaches popular culture in a softer way. The image of a heavily tattooed man with a deep voice, patiently signing every autograph and posing for every photo with fans, has eroded the boundary between the intimidating and the kind. He participates in organ donation campaigns, animal protection efforts, and support for veterans and the homeless. Not as a distant spokesperson, but as someone who shows up, extends a hand, and stays until the end. In an entertainment world that often celebrates polished perfection, Danny Trejo's greatest legacy may be his refusal to hide his fractures. He allows them to exist in public. In doing so, Trejo creates a rare space where redemption does not require ornate apologies, where inspiration comes not from never having fallen, but from standing up for the 100th time without denying the 99 falls that came before. And as that story has traveled far enough, as what he has done has moved beyond the boundaries of a single individual, Danny Trejo steps into the present with another question: how to live the rest of his life without betraying what he has learned, when the lights are still there but no longer the center of his choices. At a time when many of his peers have withdrawn from public view, Danny Trejo continues to appear, but no longer with the mindset of someone racing against time. He enters the present more slowly, more selectively, like a man who fully understands the cost of living too fast through the first half of his life. Hollywood is no longer the only door, nor the place that defines his worth. Trejo still acts, but at the pace of a man who no longer needs to prove he is useful. He accepts roles for the story, for the people behind the project, or simply because it is honest work that helps maintain a steady flow for his family and his community efforts. His newer roles are no longer iconic like Machete, but they reflect a clear shift from violence to presence, from physical force to the weight of lived experience. Even when he appears on screen for only a few minutes, Trejo carries with him the gravity of a life lived fully enough to need no explanation. Alongside film, Trejo devotes most of his energy to what he calls real life. He still lives in Pico Rivera and Mission Hills, in unpretentious homes where neighbors knew him before they knew his fame. His mornings begin with feeding the dogs, brewing coffee, reading the Bible, and answering fan mail. He treats signing autographs, taking photos, and talking with strangers as a sacred duty. "I've been given too much," he says, "so I don't have the right to turn away anyone who needs to be seen." The food empire bearing Trejo's name continues to grow, but not at the cost of expansion for its own sake. Trejo's Tacos, Trejo's Coffee and Donuts, and Trejo's Cantina have become community gathering places rather than symbols of luxury. Trejo is directly involved in shaping their internal culture, from service standards to how employees with criminal records are treated. To him, every stable shift, every bill paid on time, is a quiet victory over the past. In his 80s, health no longer allows Trejo to treat his body with the same disregard as before. His boxing workouts are now about maintenance rather than challenge. He walks more, eats more carefully, and treasures each morning he wakes up outside a prison cell. The memories of liver cancer have not vanished, but they no longer dominate him with fear. Trejo sees them as a reminder that every extra day of life is a borrowed gift. More than anything else, Trejo continues to show up in the role he values most, a first-hand storyteller for those who are still lost. He still goes to prisons, rehabilitation centers, and schools. No cameras, no script, just a man standing before young faces, saying that he once believed he did not deserve to be saved, and that belief nearly killed him. In those rooms, Trejo is not a star. He is evidence. Danny Trejo's present is not loud, not climactic, not in need of dramatic twists. It is the patient continuation of a choice made long ago, to live sober, to live responsibly, and to keep his eyes fixed on what pulled him back from the edge. And as this chapter of life gradually moves toward its final years, the question is no longer what he will do next, but what he will leave behind when he is no longer here. Danny Trejo has never viewed his life as a story meant to be celebrated. He sees it as a warning so vivid that it needs no exaggeration, no tragic soundtrack, no staged climaxes. Simply looking at the road he has traveled, from lightless solitary cells to brightly lit film sets, from an addiction that stole his childhood to a sobriety lasting more than half a century, is enough to understand that no redemption comes easily. Trejo did not win against life through acting talent, nor through fame that arrived late. He won by a choice repeated every day, not going back, not back to drugs, not back to violence, not back to the belief that he was unworthy. Every morning he wakes up, signs an autograph, shakes a stranger's hand, listens to another broken story. That is not the image of a star. It is the image of a man still paying his debt to life through decent presence. What sets Danny Trejo apart is not that he escaped his past, but that he carries it honestly. He does not erase scars, soften memories, or rewrite the story to make it easier to hear. He lets the fractures show, as a reminder that a person does not need to be perfect to be worthy, only brave enough not to abandon themselves one more time. Having lived through nearly an entire lifetime, Trejo no longer seeks forgiveness from the world. He seeks peace in small things, a modest home, a backyard garden, a hot meal shared, a young person choosing not to take another dose today because they heard his story yesterday. Perhaps that is the greatest role Danny Trejo has ever played. Not Machete, not the on-screen survivor, but a human being proving that even from the darkest place, there is still a way back. After everything, what do you think truly saved Danny Trejo? Hollywood's opportunity, or the discipline of a man who never forgot who he once was? If this story reminds you of someone still struggling with their past, or if you yourself once lived through a period that felt impossible to escape, leave a comment. Just one line is enough. And if you want to stay with stories where fame never tells the whole truth, like and subscribe to the channel. Because behind every dangerous face, sometimes there is a heart that had to learn how to live with decency. From absolute zero.